everybody, and welcome back to Ask the Unfaithful. As always, I am the eye candy, and my name is Sam. I'm joined by my brilliant counterpart, James Anir. James, how are you today?
I am well. I thought I was looking pretty good today, but
I mean, yeah, I'm not going to discount that. I was
the
just
beard
wanting
is
to make sure you felt appreciated.
very much so. Always, always. The beard is gone because I'm having surgery on Wednesday, and Sharon said that she is not gonna clean up drool and food out of my beard. So
Great.
there we
Now we
go.
have to tell everybody what's the surgery for. Tell everybody now that you're looking for
I said
sympathy and
last time. I
empathy.
think that my shoulder is blown, and that is true. It is blown. I mean, I can still do that, but that's going to be fixed. So rotator cuff, you know, all that left-handed pro pitching I did.
One of the most painful shoulder surgeries, so we'll all be thinking about you. Way to garner support and email from the audience. Great job
Yes,
there. Not
yes.
going to shame you. Not going to shame you for that. Today we are opening up a can of worms. No, just kidding. Today we are going to ask a question that is really more of a statement that will help the unfaithful and help the betrayed, as always. But also, today is a video that you, as an unfaithful, can utilize to ask yourself, am I heading down the wrong path, either for the first time or typically, if you found us, it might be again. Today's statement, today's video focuses on 6 signs you are either in or heading towards an emotional affair. For our clientele, it's probably better said more along the lines of 6 signs you are either in or heading back towards an emotional affair. But it tees it up, James, as always, so very well spoken. Talk about what actually constitutes an emotional affair, and then we will be off and running.
Okay. An emotional affair basically is a non-sexual relationship involving a similar level of emotional intimacy and bonding as your primary romantic relationship or as a romantic relationship. Sharon and I clarify this sort of in a way using our own language, saying that it is emotional acting out is whenever we put intimate emotional energy outside of our primary relationship, be it a marriage or a committed partnership. So that's really that piece, intimate emotional energy being put outside of our primary relationship really describes it. Emotional cheating, which is the same thing as emotional affair, usually has an unspoken or unconscious sexual chemistry, but it's not been acted upon, right? So that's a nice little caveat that adds to this, the depth of this definition. These usually begin as friendships, sometimes platonic relationships, and they can slowly morph into deep emotional friendships. And then if you add in when you find this other person attractive or you share chemistry, be it physically, emotionally, or intellectually, and you spend time with them, you are putting yourself and the bond of your marriage in a precarious position. Really dangerous.
It's well said that for those of us that have been emotionally unfaithful, we can read through this with you in kind of are taking notes and probably identify, that's where I allowed myself to go over the line, or that's maybe the step that I did not catch myself, or I didn't listen to my partner or my spouse or my buddy that was trying to tell me, hey, dude, hey, my friend, you're going down the wrong road. You've got to redirect or pull up. So I love the information as it creates the opportunity for us to go, you know, upon further review, it was at this moment or this moment or this moment that I really should have wised up, right?
Sure. Yeah. Our goal, hopefully, is to help people see it coming so that they can wise up way sooner.
Right.
So not making the mistakes that we made, or at least I can speak for me. Isn't that really what we're trying to do overall, is to save people from making these mistakes and also guide them through, the things that we've learned that have helped us get into the place that we are now. So I think that something that we really need to emphasize is that these things don't start out right with any intention for these bonds to grow. It's not like, oh, well, I'm gonna, start this friendship and I want that to grow into an emotional affair. It really, really typically does not start that way. But you're really playing with fire because it's a very, very thin line between close relationships or close friendships and emotional affairs, because the underpinning of both is emotional connection. It's
Yes.
necessary. Emotional connection is necessary for any meaningful relationship, whether it's platonic or romantic.
And it's obvious that so many unfaithful male or female will say, "Well, I didn't go into it thinking it would turn into an emotional affair." Well, of course, but with lack of boundaries, with weakness in our need for attention or affirmation, or wanting to feel beautiful or attractive or wanted or desired, it turned into one. Just because we didn't go into the relationship thinking that it would turn into one does not minimize the effects of it upon our partner or spouse. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, what is interesting about you and I, we talked about this, is that it starts with small behaviors, and it starts with boundaries becoming blurred. Once you start to blur boundaries, doesn't that open the door to the potential for just nuclear meltdown relationally?
Yes, absolutely, because those boundaries, once you blur them, it's so easy to step over them, right? It's kind of like you're walking along and there's a crack in a sidewalk. The crack might be
Mhm.
noticeable, but you walked over it before you even really
Yeah.
noticed it, right? Or saw it. Blurring boundaries is what's called in the field micro cheating. I'm not sure I like the term, but it kind of says
Yeah, let's
micro. Well, micro means small behaviors that are not noticeable necessarily, but can leave that person vulnerable to those behaviors growing, right?
and that's a great example and clarification. Let the betrayed know you're never going to hear us minimize cheating. You'll never hear us even get close to this opinion of "it wasn't that bad" or "you should be so thankful." Let's take a moment to use some of the phrases that so many unfortunate helpers have really used. "Oh, you should be thankful it wasn't this," or "it really wasn't that bad," or "at least he or she didn't do this, that, or the other." Absolutely not. You'll never hear that from us. Micro cheating is exactly what James said. It is blurring of boundaries and seemingly not monstrously violating actions, but it is the beginning of what could be massive destruction, right?
Yeah, some examples are sharing, like just sharing with somebody more and more. So you start out by sharing, "Oh, I've really had a really bad day." Okay, that's really innocent, right? But then over time, sharing more and more with that person, i.e., not your partner, until an emotional relationship is actually cultivated, right? And then that can evolve into embraces like hugs, flirting, touching hands, and that can quickly lead into sexual energy evolving into something that is sexual. It sort of
Yes.
starts as a fantasy and then go on. So that's really what that micro cheating is that beginning of it, those very small behaviors that you might not even consider that to be an issue. And even your partner may say that's not really an issue, but the danger is it's going to grow, and it can grow,
Right. Right.
especially the more vulnerable that a person is to their needs, their unmet childhood needs and such. So,
Yes.
like, emotional affairs involve all the things that are hallmarks of sexual affairs: secrecy, withholding, deception, disconnection from your primary partner. I mean, that sounds pretty familiar, right?
And
So,
anytime we unfaithful have the audacity to minimize our actions, to justify them, to the betrayed, it is just the absolute minimization of their emotions, their boundaries. It's massively disrespectful. It's wounding. It's all the things. But to be not just helpful, but super practical, we're going to launch out into the 6 signs that either you're in an emotional affair or you're heading that way. So maybe if you've found us, unfortunately, you've probably already encountered infidelity, but this might be a checklist to say, am I heading down that road again? Have I become so comfortable in my recovery that I am starting to miss signs that my partner or spouse is trying to say, hey, listen, it's happening again.
Yeah.
So talk about these signs. Let's start with the first one. What's the first one?
So the first one is basically frequent contact. Sometimes this is sort of starts as unavoidable. Let's say it's somebody at work. You're always, you're seeing them at work, right? They're always there. Maybe you work together, maybe not, but you walk past each other in the hall, that kind of thing. So you see this person a lot. And then, so as far as work goes, here are some indicators. Are you spending non-work oriented time with them? That doesn't mean that it can't be at work. So like breaks, let's say you're taking a 5-minute break or whatever. Are you hanging out of the coffee machine or having coffee, so on, right? Or having, if you smoke, having a smoke break with somebody. Those are they're just things, markers. Oh, I'm doing that. They're perfectly innocent to begin with, right? But they can develop. Do you often stop at that other person's office door and joke around with them a little bit, or hey, how you doing? You having a good day? That kind of thing. That's a really clear warning sign.
Going out of your way for contact. Now, in this day and age too, right? What about, I mean, inter office chats, what emailing, texting, right? All the different ways.
If you're finding that you're spending, again, it's a time thing on this one, right? If you're spending a lot of time contacting that person via text, phone, online chat, mail, video, email, video, right? If you're doing those things, and especially out of work hours, that's a real indicator. Like communicating with them at sort of questionable times. Hey, when you're supposed to be with your family or your partner having dinner, that kind of thing, or watching TV together, but you're there on your device, right? Those things are really indicators that you need to be raising a red flag for you. And then you got this other thing of personal contact. We go to gyms, we go, we go to coffee shops, if you're in a big city, eat from street vendors, anything where somebody can strike up a conversation. Gyms, working out together, working in at a machine, that kind of thing. If you're doing that with the same person, ding, 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 watch out. Because what you're trying to avoid here is getting yourself into a very precarious position.
And knowing your own darkness or shadow, right? Knowing, dude,
Yeah.
this could be fine for the average person, maybe, but for me, it is a no. He or she, no, no, no. I always love when I talk to someone who's safe, they're doing recovery work, and I love when they're like, I just knew, I could not, he or she needs to stay away, because relapse is always about pride. It's always about, it's not that big of a deal. I can handle it. I can talk to them. I can put myself in that position. We'll talk about that later. So, doesn't it also mean that sometimes we're neglecting our partner, almost creating opportunity to talk to this other person?
Yeah, so we're making time to see the other person, right? And that's also okay. Well, where can I see that person, or where can I? That's
Mm.
that's an indicator. When your contact causes you to neglect time with your partner, or shorten time with your partner or family, or work or other obligations, then that's another really big sign, right? And then the last one I think for contact is that contact with that person increases over time. That's just a huge marker. So you really have to, there's sort of a psychological thing that goes, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute what that looks like, but you might not, it might cause you not to notice that the
Yeah.
contact is increasing. You have to make yourself aware. Take a step back. Make yourself, how many times am I talking to this person? Where am I talking to them? And so on.
And if you'll do that, I'm pretty sure that your partner or spouse would appreciate you having a personal checklist. Even if you're scared to death to tell your partner, the very fact that you behind the scenes would be like, man, how am I? Let me think this through. Man, I don't know of any betrayed spouse or partner that would be like, oh, that's stupid. I think every one of them, if they knew that their unfaithful was doing that, would champion it. What's number two?
So oversharing, right? There are things that are okay to talk with somebody else about, and there are things that really need to be reserved for your partner. And we're talking, this is what makes a healthy relationship. And when you start stepping outside of those bounds, then you're going to cause problems here. So oversharing. So every last one of these examples that we're going to give will result in a diminishment of your view of your partner and reduce your desire to repair your relationship or work on your relationship. They just do. So sharing intimate details of your life. Hello, you're like putting your partner on blast, right? Not
Yeah.
really, not a good thing to do. That's between, those things are between you and your partner, those intimate details. They are sort of part of your sacred circle, your covenant, right?
Right.
That's where you share those. Your deeper emotions, the same thing. I mean, most of your emotions really, right? We're operating out of the standpoint here of what is sacred within the relationship, and whether there's betrayal or not, that's been here, that's already been here. Emotional sharing with just some other body is not really okay. So I have a couple of very close friends, right, guys, which is actually helpful, me being heterosexual, right? Okay, I can share with them. One of them I'm going to share this much, the other one knows me better, and I'm going to share this much, right?
Yeah.
And so they're not unsafe, those people, but there are a
Yeah.
lot of people who would be unsafe, and I don't go near them like I wouldn't go near the plague,
And
right?
it's out of loyalty to say,
Yeah.
there's just no reason for me to share this information with this other person because am I looking for sympathy? Am I looking for pity? Am I looking for, oh, that's so awful. Man, that should be a check that goes, oh, nope,
Yeah.
nope. It can't go down that road because he or she just gets me. Oh, the alarms go off, right?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, here she understands me or gets me or hears me or sees me. Man, those all are talking about unmet childhood needs. Those are huge, like tractor beams. That's where you got a real big heads up when you start thinking that about another person. When
Mm.
we express our emotions deeply with somebody and they understand us or get us or listen to that and listen to it heartfully, or and receive it, we are deepening our attachment to that person. We're building an attachment, a secure attachment with them, and because it's an emotional attachment, we're actually detracting from the emotional attachment that we have with our partner.
Doesn't it also amplify resentment that we have towards our partner?
It does when you complain about your partner to this person, absolutely, because what are they going to do? Oh man, that's awful, that's terrible.
Right,
I mean, they don't
right.
know your partner, right? And so they're just going to hear your side and agree with you. And man, she's so just a control freak or whatever, right? That resentment that you might already have, which is probably misplaced if you really examine it, is gonna amplify and grow, especially when this person co-signs your BS,
Yeah.
and they're going to. So here's another thing that's really important. I got this. It's a little bit of a take on Brene Brown, but when people are talking bad about other people together, it's not really a connection. It strongly feels like it, but what it is you're just making a connection out of talking bad about that person, not about a real connection, but it sure feels like it, and you're going to feel this bond, and it's all surrounding the resentment, which you're now making bigger, and that person is going to add to it. So,
Well, and that person, and that develops a bond with that person, right? That
yeah,
bond is, let's complain about each other's partners or spouses or what have you. And so we're huddling up together and they become this confidant, which is just dangerous anytime, especially for someone who's already been unfaithful. You do not have any room in your life for another confidant outside of your partner. Like
yep.
you alluded to, same-sex relationships that are built on safety and communication and maybe even accountability, awesome. But anytime there's a member of the opposite sex that becomes a confidant, I mean, how could we ever say, it's not a big deal?
We can't, because, what we're doing is displacing our partner. And when our partner's not number one in our lives, then, they're going to come in last all the time.
Makes great sense.
Yeah. Here's a real big indicator. When that person becomes the first person you think of sharing important things with, your feelings, good news, bad news, etc., problem, massive problem. If they are in fact the first person that you share it with, massive problem. Right?
Yeah, very
So
true.
this is huge. That is, I mean, I really hope that everybody is picking up on this stuff before it gets to that place. If it's at that place, you're pretty much full blown in an emotional affair, and you need to
Right.
get yourself out of it right away. That's a
Excellent.
indicator.
And that speaks to the third one. The third one you put in the notes was preoccupation,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yeah. So maybe I should have put that part in the preoccupation piece, but you find yourself thinking about this person a lot. Here's a toxicity warning. Toxicity warning. If you think about them when you're with your partner, whoo, really, really bad. Because
Excellent.
hey, if you're with your partner, that's the person who is front and center in your life.
Right.
You're thinking about this other person, that's really, really bad. Or here's another one, randomly thinking about them during the day more than you think lovingly about your partner. So this
Hmm.
person's coming up for you more than your partner is. Those are massive toxicity warnings for sure.
And let's for a moment kind of validate the fact it's probably pretty tough for you, betrayed, to be listening to this, hearing these details. We know that you know them because you're not watching this podcast if you haven't been through some form of infidelity and trying to navigate through it. And I just want to say on behalf of James and I, and we understand that this is really difficult to hear. The goal of this podcast is not to take you down a trail of reminders and triggers, but to educate the unfaithful, to help the unfaithful have a bit of awareness of how this happened, to make sure it never happens again, and to help you, the betrayed, be able to get a better handle on how it happened and why do affairs happen. And if you are saving the relationship or attempting to save the relationship, here's some things that you can look out for. Here's some things that can help educate you so that you and your partner are on the same page. Or in your next relationship, things that you can look out for and be aware of and have as a bit of a checklist. Because anybody that goes into another relationship after their initial relationship has been compromised by infidelity is just raw. And they're not crazy for being raw. And they're not freak shows for being raw or second guessing what's going on. They've probably got betrayal trauma and it's totally okay. So, you betrayeds, we're so glad that you're here. Please don't ever think that we're being cavalier of why you're here or how you're here, but these are things to look out for to help you move through one of the most difficult times of your life, right, James?
Yeah, obviously we're pointing this at the unfaithful so that they can take this in and go, am I doing that? Right? But it can be really hard to hear, especially when partners are still raw, as you said, and still in their betrayal trauma, and oh my gosh, is this going on as well? Or is it
Right.
happening now with that person and so on? It's really, really difficult. So absolutely. I'm so
Excellent.
glad you paused us to talk about that. Uh,
Well, I know you and Sharon do a phenomenal job in your intensives, and talking about hard things is unfortunately something that we both have become really good at because we've had to be. The next one is probably one of the tougher things for the betrayed to
yeah,
hear, and that is the issue of comparison, right?
yeah. So when you start this for the unfaithful, when you start comparing this person that you're emotionally involved with your partner, it's going to create real issues because when you do it, your partner can't help but look bad. And why is that?
Right.
Why is that? I mean, one would think, oh, well, if I'm comparing apples to apples, right, then yeah, why wouldn't my partner come out ahead? I love her or him and so on. But really, at this stage, especially if there's been betrayal, which is probable for most people watching this, your partner's in a trauma reaction a lot of the time. And when they're in a trauma reaction, they are not in their happiest selves, right?
Right.
So if they're not in their happiest selves, it can be really difficult to be at the receiving end of somebody who's in a trauma reaction because that's exactly what it is. There's anger, there's rage. Comparing that to somebody else where honestly you're looking at a fantasy there. That isn't a real
Yeah.
person. There's no other things going on. And that person hasn't been betrayed by you, so you're not going to get that. If you are doing that, you're really comparing to the fantasy of this other person. And that fantasy will develop because they are empathetic to all your stuff.
Right. And
So
there that's what we would call intensity, but not intimacy. Intimacy is paying bills, mood swings, raising kids, not having enough finances, trying to, turn a penny into a dollar, unmet needs and frustrations, and that's intimacy.
yes,
Intensity is a fantasy. That's we get into pornography, we get into all kinds of escapism, and many times we're chasing intensity, not intimacy. Because intimacy is the hard knocks of life. Intensity is fantasy and escapism, just to name a couple of words, right?
yeah. Uh, you know, you're looking at in terms of the fantasy. This other person is an idealization. It's an image,
Yes,
both presented and projected. So they present the image, and you project that onto them. And so really you're only getting the best of this other person and they're only getting the best of you. You don't see all the other aspects that you were talking about. You don't live with them, so you don't see their not so great stuff. You don't see them 24/7 and learn about all that. So your image is basically mainly based on fantasy and an idealized persona, which will undoubtedly make that relationship very alluring, and your partner doesn't stand a chance against a fantasy like that.
that's exactly right. And the next one can also be very troubling for the betrayed. But as a bit of an explanation, it is the concept of secrets. And isn't it also true that we unfaithful will share our secrets because we're oftentimes looking for empathy, sympathy? We're looking for someone to applaud us and justify us, not just to share our secrets, but our motives are so impure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a flip side to that coin, and that's the keeping of secrets, right?
Yes.
So these are big indicators. So if I'm telling secrets to this other person, or I'm telling inner private thoughts to this other person, those are either yours or to be shared with your partner, right? Privacy is a bit different from secrets, but we can choose to share the privacy. The secrets are things that we're either afraid to share or that might cause damage. So if I'm in an emotional relationship, if I haven't told my partner about that relationship, isn't that a problem? Because what am I trying to keep secret? What am I afraid of? That my partner might say, I'm not
Right.
around that. I don't like,
Right.
and then I have to end that. So if I'm afraid to tell my partner about it, that's an indicator right there. If I have to justify that friendship, but it's just this person at work, and we get along, and we work together, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, if I'm justifying, no, I can't. I'm not saying that there aren't people that you have to work with that you can be friendly with.
Of course.
By golly,
Absolutely.
You've got to be careful because those boundaries blur so easily. Remember the crack in the sidewalk piece. So if we are keeping secrets, if we're afraid to tell our partner, and if we have to justify that friendship to our partner, it's probably not a very healthy relationship to be having. So
Absolutely.
the other part of that, there's a thing in AA that says secrets keep you sick. What's
Yeah.
the opposite of sick? Healthy. So secrets are the opposite of healthy.
Yeah. And I think it puts a lot on us unfaithful to be able to say, man, I've got to be really aware. I've got to be self-aware. I've got to have accountability with other people besides my partner or spouse. And if I'm self-aware and I see danger, then I can talk to somebody about it, and then I can enforce some boundaries. The reality is that if we're not self-aware, we blow it as unfaithful. And if we don't have people around us besides just our partner or spouse that can say, hey, how you doing with this? How you doing with this? And hold us accountable because they care about us and they care about our relationship, we're also doomed. But the next one, number 6, is a little bit tricky. And that's the concept of fantasy. What's a big deal? It's just me fantasizing about them. It's not like I'm doing anything. I don't even talk to that person very often. So who cares if I fantasize about that or about them? Why is that dangerous to fantasize about somebody at your workplace or gym or what have you?
Because it does the exact same thing in the brain as if you were actually doing it.
Really?
Yeah, it's like porn, for instance. When people watch porn, why is that a relationship with porn? Why is it triggering? In actual fact, online porn triggers almost double what illicit sex will. Yeah, I can go into that another time, but basically, it's a little less than
You're
double.
gonna have to in the future because we
That's
just opened up a can of thoughts. But speak to the issue of
right.
fantasy because it's really important.
Fantasy, so if it's tripping your brain in the same way, the massive dopamine releases, the adrenaline releases because it's a taboo thing, right? And also in this case, because it's an emotional piece, not just sexual, then you've got a massive flooding of oxytocin. So when you're fantasizing about, oh, wouldn't it be nice to go to this place with that person, right? Or do a mountain bike ride or whatever, or motorcycle riding through the mountains or whatever, right? Something like that, that really that's reserved for your partner. You start imagining that with them. Now you're creating a ton of oxytocin there. The sexual fantasies would be more of the dopamine and adrenaline. So, but it's still releasing, just fantasy releases the same amount. You don't have to be having any kind of sex. You don't even have to be touching yourself. And that's releasing all of that because that's when we're getting high, is really pre-orgasm is where we're getting high. It's called hyperarousal. Again, I can go into that in a much greater detail when we can. But that's the danger of fantasy. The other danger, of course, is that increases the preoccupation with this
Yeah.
person. And that, of course, is going to take away from your attention to your partner. Not to mention, fantasizing about partnering with somebody else, about sex with somebody else, you're in a
Yeah.
relationship. That's just not okay, flat out.
So as we wind down the conversation, what are some things that the unfaithful can do if they've heard this and they're like, crap, I've let some things slide. I've had some blind spots. Maybe there's betrayeds that are like, I don't like what he or she is doing. This has created some alarms going off inside of me. What are some steps they can take?
So we mentioned this in another one. If your partner cannot be standing right next to you, waving their pom-poms in the air, going, yeah, you go, that's awesome, I love that decision, don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
that is such a nice, simple guide, right? Then just mostly just don't. Like, okay, so here's this person. All right. If you feel any kind of a pull towards that person, just don't, because you are so setting yourself up.
Because we're moving again outside, or we're being tempted to move outside of our account of our integrity. Rather, we're being tempted one more time, and we probably didn't catch it the first time. So maybe our awareness should be above and beyond our
Yeah,
first experience,
we
right?
cannot afford not to amp our awareness up about what's going on in our surroundings, what's happening. You know, we just can't afford that risk. There's just not, if you don't have a ton of recovery under your belt, then you don't have enough to be able to be friends with, if heterosexually, with members of the opposite sex, right? You just don't. So really avoid it as much as you possibly can. If you have to interact with somebody, interact with them, but in that, remember I said yes ma'am, no ma'am kind of, or yes,
Right.
no, sir, just kind of keeping it very formal. You know, acting out in any way, emotionally, sexually, in any way, is actually acting outside of your integrity. The betrayals that you've done in the past, this is just another fantasy. It's a self-soothing wolf in sheep's clothing. It's just very dangerous.
Right.
Uh, Third thing, consider how your partner would feel. Right? This is very similar to the pom poms, but what if you were doing this and your partner saw the way you're interacting with this person, laughing,
Right.
you know, even if you're not touching, but that kind of intimate interaction. Put yourself in your partner's shoes and imagine watching you do it with this person. How much would that hurt? How much
Yeah,
pain?
absolutely.
Um,
Because the betrayed partner is really raw. And
yeah,
anytime that we, as unfaithful, complain about how raw our betrayed partner is, it's usually a sign that we're not getting it. And we've probably gotten away from recovery principles, because there should be an awareness to, well, he or she might be highly sensitive, highly reactive, but that's because I've already put them through hell. So you know what? I got to look at myself, not them. Is that fair?
yes, absolutely. So that comes down to attachment, right? We've already put them through this ringer. So their attachment right now to us is going to be preoccupied or avoidant, which is an anxious, both of those are anxious types of attachment. And so they're going to be anxious and they're going to be hypervigilant about you, and anything that remotely looks or feels like cheating is, to their
Yeah.
perception, right? And it is devastating. Their perception of their own truth, of their own intuition, has already been so damaged by our betrayal that you really never can ask them to extend the trust. Well, right now, extend the trust of any kind of emotional relationship outside of the one that you have with them, other than family and long-term same sex, like we talked about, as long as that's not a problem for your partner's safety.
You used the term in another discussion that I thought was great, and we talked about it being one of the things that we can do as unfaithful. And it's so simple, but yet it's so profound, as being hyper respectful of our partner in every situation, right?
Yeah. So take whatever you see as respect and amp that stuff up, man. Make it hyper respectful. I'm talking like in the 1800s when, a lady had to walk over a puddle. The gentleman would take his coat off and lay it over the puddle for her. You know, there's nothing, I'm okay, so who wears a coat and all that anymore, but you get what I'm saying. There's this hyper respect that your partner deserves.
We know it's tough. We
Yeah.
know it's tough. Walking through the healing of betrayal trauma is arduous, doesn't do it justice. It can be incredibly challenging, but here's a cheat code if you're an unfaithful, male or female. Be hyper respectful. However you talk about your partner, how you introduce them to people. When you go to work parties, oh my gosh, so many people at work parties, they just blow it. well, I have to mingle. Well, take your partner with you and stay by your partner's side if you don't have to mingle, and just reinforce to them, hey, you're the most important person here at this gathering. I mean, the hyper respectful description to me, I love it. I think it's just fantastic. And then you said something else off camera. You said communicate, collaborate, and connect.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Here's something that is really not talked about very much, but we rely so much on our partners to make the boundaries, probably so we can complain about them.
Right.
But ask yourself, be proactive. Ask yourself, what boundaries would my partner want around this kind of thing? Then have a conversation with him or her about it, so that avoiding a hard conversation is always going to lead to further damage and disconnection. Ask your partner, who do you feel is safe for me to share an emotional connection with? Typically, it's going to be somebody who's known to them, who's a trusted friend, who are often in a good relationship. What you're going to do with these boundaries is collaborate. So collaborate on the boundaries. This is not a negotiation. It's collaborating for what is going to be the best for you as a couple to grow. It's like what you were saying when you're at an office party, for instance. If you stay together, if that's one of the boundaries you collaborate on and come up with, you know what you're doing? You're walking around that office party together, and everybody knows that you two are together, that you are joined, that you are one. You are Sharon and I call it the we. We have a model that we call the we model, we-ness model, actually. It's a whole long story. But when you're presenting as the we, that doesn't let anybody in, right? Anybody that could be dangerous. So lean into, here's a piece of advice for the unfaithful, lean into something you might not want. So you're going to go beyond what you determine as fair and overbuild the boundaries, right? So like, you're not just building a fence around that as a boundary, but something that's going to keep like wall climbing monkey zombies out. Right? I remember back at Georgia Tech, before I got kicked out, in architecture, we had to build this bridge, and it had to have a certain span. It was made out of styrofoam, and it had to be able to support a 20-pound dumbbell. And it had to weigh a certain amount. Mine had the right span, but then it was far too long. It weighed twice as much as it should, but it took a 40-pound dumbbell.
Well,
by the way, I got a D, but still, because I didn't stay in the parameters. But that's what we're saying, right? Overbuild it, man. The connection piece, timing is really important here, because of course how sensitive your partner might be. Connecting, like spending time together, might not be the first thing on your partner's agenda, right? They may need some solitude. But as that develops, and as you can, spend time together. Be transparent. What does that mean? We talk about transparency as far as sharing the radical truth, right? But it is also sharing your daily life. Oh, had lunch with Joe today, or, whatever, and we talked about this, and yada yada, here's what happened at work. Just sharing your daily life, being vulnerable. I'm really scared about, this downsizing that's coming up. I'm worried about it. That's being vulnerable. None of this means limiting contact or emotional connection with safe others and friends who have been agreed upon when you collaborate with your partner on boundaries, because these connections are still necessary for emotional well-being. If we shut down everything, we're not going to do very well, and we're going to end up with resentment, and we're not going to emotionally be okay. So doing it with these parameters in mind, we can actually have that health, that emotional health in our life.
I think it's so well said that what we're looking for is emotional health. We're looking for emotional and relational intelligence. And if you're watching and we can help in any way, by all means, feel free to reach out to us. You can email us at asktheunfaithful@gmail.com. We get so many email and we're so grateful for them. We answer them as fast as we can, but so many of you might be sitting here going, my partner will not listen to me. They just won't get it. And many times it takes a third party, an objective third party who has been through infidelity before, that can come in and say, listen, let me translate this into testosterone or translate this into estrogen. Let me help it make sense, because you might be missing something here. And like you talked about, whether it be projection, right? Or whether it be that we are just massively defensive. And oftentimes finding the right people with the right pathway can bring healing and bring restoration.
If I had to leave with a piece of advice, get help from people who have been through this before, because they're really going to get you.
And if people understand you, they can help you and relate to you. And they can also be kind. People that haven't been through this before struggle to many times be kind with the unfaithful or the betrayed. And that's unfortunate. But I can tell you, if you're looking for an intensive, you're not going to find more educated, brilliant, but kind people than James and Sharon. So if we can help in any way, by all means, reach out. Thank you for joining us on Ask the Unfaithful.